The first time Monsieur Laurent Duval entered Café Marigold, the air shifted. It wasn't just his expensive suit or the faint scent of sandalwood that followed him in, it was the quiet gravity of a man who didn't need to demand attention because the world already offered it to him. He moved like someone who'd spent his whole life being observed, studied, and never truly seen. He came in precisely at 8:45 every morning, sat by the window, ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no milk, and spoke to no one. The staff whispered theories behind the counter. He's scouting properties for investment. No, he's hiding from something. I heard he's that billionaire from France, Duval Hotels or something. Only one person didn't join in the gossip, Clara, the shy waitress with quiet eyes and a voice soft as rain. She had only been working at Café Marigold for 2 months. Her English was good enough, but her French, that was her secret talent. She'd studied linguistics before her mother's illness forced her to leave university. Working in the café wasn't part of her dream, but it was what kept the lights on and her mother's medicine stocked. Every morning, Clara watched Monsieur Duval from a respectful distance. There was something about him that drew her attention, not his money, not his mystery, but his silence. The kind of silence that didn't come from arrogance, but from exhaustion. From being in a world that spoke too loudly and understood too little. He never smiled, never looked up when people spoke to him. And when the barista tried to make small talk, his heavy accent made the exchange awkward. One morning, it happened. "Bonjour, monsieur," said the barista, attempting to sound polite but fumbling the pronunciation. Came the low reply. Duval's eyes stayed fixed on the window, his jaw tightening slightly. "Coffee, right, black," he murmured something in French, too quiet to catch. The barista blinked, confused. "Sorry, sir, could you repeat that?" Clara heard the frustration in the man's voice even before she caught the words. "Je disais, laissez tomber." I said, "Never mind." She didn't think, she just moved. "Excusez-moi, monsieur," she said softly, stepping forward. "Je peux vous aider." "Excuse me, sir. May I help you?" The café fell silent. The French billionaire looked up, truly seeing her for the first time. His expression softened, his eyes, a stormy gray, flickered with surprise. "Vous parlez français?" he asked. "You speak French?" "Oui," she said, cheeks flushing. "Couramment." For a second, he seemed unsure what to do with that. Then, almost imperceptibly, a smile appeared, faint, but real. "Enfin," he murmured. "Quelqu'un qui comprend." Finally, someone who understands. From that morning onward, everything changed. Monsieur Duval spoke only to Clara. He began to order with a quiet gratitude in his tone, his voice softer, more human. What started as brief exchanges grew into small conversations, about the weather, about France, about how London coffee will never taste like Paris, no matter how hard they try. She laughed, and for the first time, he laughed too. He told her he was in London overseeing the acquisition of a boutique hotel chain, something about expanding his brand's human touch. But in truth, she thought, he seemed like the loneliest man in the city. Clara listened more than she spoke. She never asked about his money or his business. And maybe that's why he kept talking. He told her about growing up in Lyon, about his mother who taught him poetry before she passed, about the constant ache of being admired but never understood. "Everyone listens to what I say," he said once, stirring his untouched coffee, "but no one ever listens to what I mean." Clara looked at him, for a long moment before replying softly, "That's because most people listen to answer, not to understand." That day, he finished his coffee. For the first time, weeks passed, their bond deepened in quiet ways. A folded napkin with a French proverb, a croissant from a bakery he said, almost, reminded him of home. A shared moment of laughter when he mispronounced an English idiom and accidentally insulted a customer. But not everyone at Café Marigold was amused. The manager, Mr. Hopkins, noticed how Duval's eyes followed Clara when she moved, how she lingered near his table longer than usual. "Clara," he said one afternoon, adjusting his tie, "remember, this isn't a social club. That man's a client, not a friend." "I understand, sir." But she didn't. Not really. Because every morning, when Duval looked up and smiled at her, she felt like she was speaking a language that went deeper than words, the language of being seen. Then, one Tuesday morning, he didn't come. 8:45 passed, 9 o'clock passed. By 9:30, Clara had checked the door twice, pretending to wipe tables she'd already cleaned. The next day, he still wasn't there. Nor the day after. Her chest tightened with a strange ache she couldn't name. She told herself it was silly, he was a customer, nothing more. But when she found herself glancing at the clock every few minutes, she realized the truth, she missed him. On Friday, as she took a tray to the kitchen, she nearly dropped it when the bell above the door chimed. There he was, same navy suit, same quiet presence, but his eyes were tired. "Bonjour, Clara," he said softly. She smiled before she could stop herself. "Vous êtes revenu. You came back." "Of course," he said. "Where else would I get such terrible coffee served with such kindness?" She laughed, but then she noticed the envelope in his hand. He placed it on the counter, his expression serious. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "I'm opening a new restaurant at one of my hotels in Paris. I need someone bilingual, someone who understands people. Not just service. I want you to work with me." Her breath caught. "In Paris?" "Yes," he said simply. "In Paris." She hesitated. "I can't. My mother, she still needs me here." He nodded slowly, no disappointment in his face, only understanding. "Family first," he said. "But if you ever change your mind." He tapped the envelope. "Inside is my card, and a promise." Then he smiled, small, wistful, real. "Merci, Clara, for speaking my language, when no one else would." And just like that, he was gone. For weeks, she kept the envelope in her drawer. Sometimes she took it out, just to trace the embossed gold letters, Duval Group. But she never called. Her mother's health improved slowly, and life went on. Still, every time the doorbell chimed at 8:45, her heart jumped. Just in case. Months later, on a gray afternoon, a courier arrived at the cafe with a letter. No return address, just her name in neat handwriting. Inside was a single note. "Greater than Café Marigold was the first place I felt understood in this city. The restaurant opens next week. There will always be a seat for you. Laurent." And beneath it, a plane ticket to Paris. Clara sat at the counter, the letter trembling in her hands. Through the window, the city looked soft under the drizzle, gray skies, blurred lights, and the faint hum of buses passing. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stirring in her chest. Not fear, not longing, possibility. That evening, she went home and told her mother everything. About the man no one understood. About how he spoke in a way that made her remember why she loved languages, not just the words, but the meanings behind them. Her mother listened quietly, then smiled. "Maybe it's time you stop translating other people's dreams," she said gently, "and start living your own." The next morning, Café Marigold opened as usual. But one table, the one by the window, stayed empty. By afternoon, the manager found a letter on the counter. Clara's resignation, written neatly, sealed with a thank you note. Meanwhile, at Charles de Gaulle Airport, a nervous young woman sat by the gate, her hands wrapped around a passport and a folded letter. When the boarding call came for Paris, she stood, heart pounding, and smiled. Because somewhere across the sea, in a city of lights and language, someone was waiting, not just to offer her a job, but to remind her that the most powerful connections in life aren't built through wealth or status. They're built through understanding. And for two people who had lived too long in silence, that understanding was worth more than any fortune. The first time Monsieur Laurent Duval entered Café Marigold, the world seemed to pause for a beat. His movements were deliberate, his silence commanding. He wasn't tall in an obvious way, but he carried himself like someone accustomed to power, the kind that didn't shout, only existed. He wore a charcoal suit with the subtle shine of expensive tailoring. His shoes were spotless. His cufflinks glinted with quiet confidence. And when he ordered, his accent, soft but precise, turned heads. "Un café noir, s'il vous plaît." The barista blinked. Sorry, sir." Laurent's jaw tightened slightly. "A coffee, black." He sat by the window, opened his tablet, and didn't say another word. To most people in the café, he was a curiosity. The mysterious French guy, who came in every morning at exactly 8:45, ordered the same drink, and left by 9:15 without ever finishing his cup. The waitstaff whispered theories. "He's scouting properties." "No, he's avoiding paparazzi." "I heard he's some billionaire hotel owner, the Duval Group or something." Only one person didn't join the gossip. Clara, the shy waitress who had started a month ago. Clara was quiet, careful, and often invisible, exactly how she preferred it. She'd studied languages before life demanded something more practical. Her mother's illness had drained her savings, so she'd taken the cafe job. Her English was decent, her French fluent, though no one knew that part. Every morning, she watched Monsieur Duval. He was distant but not rude, elegant but somehow sad. His eyes lingered on the street as if searching for something he'd lost long ago. One morning, everything changed. It started with a misunderstanding, as many small miracles do. "Bonjour, monsieur," the barista said awkwardly. "What'll it be?" Duval frowned slightly. "Un café noir, s'il vous plaît." Black coffee." He nodded once, muttering something under his breath. "Toujours la même chose. Always the same thing." The barista smiled nervously. "Sure, same thing." Duval sighed, rubbed his temples, and spoke again in rapid French, something about how tiring it was to repeat himself, how exhausting it felt to be misunderstood even when you spoke clearly. Clara, standing nearby, understood every word. Before she realized it, she stepped forward. "Excusez-moi, monsieur," she said softly. "Je peux vous aider?" "Excuse me, sir. May I help you?" The café went silent. Laurent looked up, truly looked, and for the first time, there was life in his eyes. "Vous parlez français?" he asked, disbelief breaking through his calm exterior. "You speak French?" "Oui," she replied, her cheeks warm. "Couramment," he exhaled, a sound between relief and gratitude. "Enfin," he murmured, "quelqu'un qui comprend." Finally, someone who understands. From that day forward, the dynamic shifted. Clara became the only one who served Monsieur Duval. Their exchanges started simple, orders, polite greetings, then grew longer, more personal. He told her he was in London overseeing the acquisition of a small luxury hotel chain. A formality, he said, though his tone suggested it was more complicated. She told him about her studies, her mother, her love of languages. He smiled when she spoke, as if her voice steadied him. "London is cold," he said one morning, sipping his coffee. "Beautiful, but cold. Everyone speaks, but no one listens." She nodded. "I think that's true everywhere." He watched her for a moment, then said, almost to himself, "Maybe. But you listen differently." For the first time, Clara saw something in him beyond the polished exterior, loneliness. Not the kind that came from being alone, but the kind that came from being surrounded by people who never really saw you. And that was when it began, a connection not of words, but of understanding. Part 2. The Language of the Heart. 3 weeks later, Monsieur Duval's seat by the window was empty. 8:45 came and went. Then 9 o'clock. Clara tried not to notice, but her hands trembled as she carried trays. By the end of the day, she caught herself glancing toward the door more times than she could count. The next day, still nothing. "Maybe he flew back to France," the barista said casually. "Maybe," Clara murmured, forcing a smile. But the thought left a quiet ache in her chest. It wasn't just that she missed his presence, it was that she'd grown used to being understood. In a life filled with noise, he had spoken softly, and somehow, she'd heard everything. On Friday morning, the bell above the door chimed, and there he was. The same immaculate suit, the same quiet grace, but his eyes, they looked tired. "Bonjour, Clara," he said, his voice low. She smiled before she could stop herself. "Vous êtes revenu. You came back." "Of course," he said. "Where else would I find someone who corrects my grammar with such kindness?" She laughed, and for a brief moment, it was like no time had passed. But then she saw the envelope in his hand. He set it on the counter. "I have to go back to Paris next week," he said quietly. "But before I do, I'd like to offer you something." Her heart skipped. What kind of offer? He hesitated, searching her eyes. "I'm opening a new restaurant at one of my hotels, near the Seine. I need someone bilingual, someone who understands people, not just customers." Her breath caught. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to work with me," he corrected gently. "If you'd like." The cafe seemed to vanish around them, just the two of them standing in the soft hum of morning. "I can't," she said finally, her voice trembling. "My mother's still recovering. I can't leave her." He nodded slowly, no trace of disappointment in his face. "Family first," he said. "Always." He slid the envelope toward her. "Inside is my card, and a promise." She blinked. "A promise," he smiled faintly, "that if you ever decide to chase your dreams, I'll be waiting, with a place for you." And just like that, he was gone. Months passed. The cafe returned to its ordinary rhythm. The seat by the window remained empty, though Clara never stopped glancing at it. Her mother's health improved. The days grew longer. Then one evening, just before closing, a courier arrived with a letter. The return address read, Duval Group, Paris. Clara's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a short note in neat, careful handwriting. Greater than Café Marigold was the first place I felt understood in this city. The restaurant opens next month. There will always be a seat for you. Laurent. Beneath it, a plane ticket to Paris. She stared at it for a long moment, her heart racing. Then she smiled. Small at first, then wider. That night, she told her mother everything. About the French billionaire, the conversations, the offer, the way he'd looked at her not like a waitress, but like a person. Her mother listened, then said softly, sometimes, understanding someone's language isn't about words. It's about seeing who they are. He saw you, Clara. The next morning, Clara arrived early. She stood by the window, his table, and looked out at the London street where their story began. Then she placed her resignation letter on the counter, slipped the plane ticket into her bag, and walked out into the morning light. 2 weeks later, Paris glowed beneath the spring sun. Inside the newly opened restaurant Duval, the air smelled of fresh croissants and roasted coffee. Laurent stood by the entrance, greeting guests with the poise of a man who finally felt at home. Then the doors opened again, and there she was. Clara. He froze, his composure cracking into something raw and beautiful. Vous êtes venu, he said softly. You came. Of course, she said, smiling. Where else would I find someone who speaks my language? Their laughter mingled with the music of the city, and for the first time, the billionaire who had once lived in silence found the one voice that truly understood him. Not through words, but through the language of the heart.